The CEO was a man people respected everywhere he went. His name carried weight in business circles, and whenever he entered a room, people noticed. He was tall, always dressed in sharp suits, and spoke with confidence. People admired his success and envied the empire he had built over the years. Yet, behind this image of power and wealth, there was a side of him that very few people understood. He was a father, and like any father, his heart was tied to his daughter. But his daughter lived a life that was far different from the glamorous world that surrounded him. His only daughter, Sophia, had been paralyzed after a tragic accident when she was young. The doctors had done everything they could, but the damage was permanent. She could no longer walk, and though she used a wheelchair to move around, her spirit was never broken. Sophia had grown into a beautiful young woman. Her long hair framed her face, her eyes were warm, and her smile could light up any room. But sadly, very few people ever gave her the chance to show that light. Sophia was intelligent. She loved books, art, and music. She had opinions, dreams, and an amazing sense of humor. But at events where her father appeared, she often sat quietly in a corner. People would greet her politely, maybe give a small nod, but they would never truly engage with her. Most of them were uncomfortable. They didn't know how to treat her, so instead of trying, they avoided her. It wasn't cruelty, it was ignorance. And over time, Sophia grew used to being invisible in a room full of people. Her father noticed this more than anyone. The CEO loved his daughter deeply. He provided her with the best education, the best doctors, and the most loving care he could give. Yet, he could not control the way the world treated her. At every gala, every corporate dinner, and every party, he saw the same thing, his daughter being ignored while others danced, laughed, and shared stories. It broke his heart, but he could not force people to look at her the way he did. He saw her brilliance, her beauty, and her strength. But the world only saw the wheelchair. Sophia, on her part, never complained. She carried herself with quiet grace. She dressed elegantly for every event, always smiling when her father introduced her to his guests. She asked people about their lives, complimented them kindly, and listened to their stories. But rarely did anyone ask about her dreams. Rarely did anyone truly listen to her. When she returned home, she would sit by her bedroom window, watching the stars. In the silence of the night, she wondered what it would feel like to be loved not because of her father's status, not out of sympathy, but because someone truly wanted to know her. The world saw her as fragile, but she was stronger than most people realized. She had accepted her life, yet deep inside, there was still a longing to be seen not as a disabled girl, but as a woman with thoughts, feelings, and a heart full of love. Her wheelchair was only a part of her story, not the whole of it. But unfortunately, most people never looked past it. One evening, her father prepared for another grand celebration. His company had just closed a deal worth millions, and the success called for a gala that would be remembered for years. The ballroom was decorated with golden lights, crystal chandeliers, and white roses placed on every table. The air smelled of expensive perfume and fine food. Guests in designer clothes walked in, greeting each other with warm embraces and rehearsed smiles. It was a perfect image of luxury, power, and success. As always, Sophia dressed beautifully for the occasion. She wore a flowing blue gown that matched the sparkle in her eyes. Her father looked at her before they left the house and said, "You look like a princess tonight." She smiled, holding his hand, and whispered, "Thank you, Dad." Deep down, she hoped the evening would be different, though experience told her it would be the same. When they arrived at the gala, all eyes turned to the CEO. Cameras flashed, people congratulated him, and the sound of applause filled the room. Sophia followed quietly beside him, seated in her wheelchair. A few people bent down to greet her, saying things like, "You look lovely tonight," or "It's so nice to see you." But after a few moments, they moved on. The pattern repeated itself throughout the night. People admired her beauty from a distance but quickly turned their attention back to business conversations, gossip, or laughter with others. Sophia found herself once again sitting near the edge of the room, away from the crowd. From her spot, she could see the whole ballroom. Waiters moved swiftly with trays of food, the orchestra played soft music, and couples danced in the center of the floor. She rested her chin on her hand, pretending to be content, but her heart ached with loneliness. She was surrounded by hundreds of people, yet she felt invisible. Her father kept looking at her from across the room. He wanted to sit beside her, but as the host, he had to keep moving, greeting important guests, and maintaining appearances. Still, his eyes returned to her every few minutes. He knew she was lonely, and it broke him inside. He wished anyone would step forward and give her the attention she deserved. Sophia, however, wore her usual brave smile. She refused to show her sadness because she didn't want to add to her father's worries. She loved him too much for that. She told herself it was just another night, another gala where she would blend into the background. She had learned to accept it. But no matter how much she tried to convince herself, a small voice inside her still whispered, "Maybe tonight will be different." As the orchestra continued to play, she thought about her dreams. She dreamed of being asked to dance, of being invited into conversations, of someone seeing her not as the CEO's daughter or the girl in the wheelchair, but as Sophia, the woman who loved art, who adored stargazing, who wanted to travel the world, and who believed in love despite everything. She dreamed, but dreams often felt too far away in the world she lived in. And so, there she was again, beautiful, graceful, intelligent, and yet unnoticed. The crowd sparkled, the laughter echoed, and the night went on. She sighed softly, looking at the lights on the ceiling. She didn't know that the moment she least expected it, her life was about to change forever. Because somewhere in that same ballroom, a single dad named Daniel stood with his young daughter. And unlike everyone else, his eyes were not fixed on the powerful CEO or the glamorous crowd. His eyes had found Sophia. The ballroom sparkled with gold and silver lights, and the sound of music floated gently across the room. Guests moved about with practiced grace, laughing at jokes, clinking glasses, and shaking hands that sealed powerful business connections. But in the middle of all this glitter, one corner of the room remained quiet. That was where Sophia sat, her blue gown glowing softly under the chandelier. She looked every bit like a princess, yet she was once again the girl nobody truly noticed. Her father, the CEO, stayed busy with guests, his smile steady though his heart was restless. He wanted his daughter to be seen, but he knew how these nights often unfolded. People admired power, money, and appearances. Few cared enough to look beyond what was obvious. He hoped, even prayed silently, that this evening might surprise him. At the far side of the ballroom stood a man who did not quite fit in with the polished crowd. His name was Daniel. He wasn't a tycoon or a high-level executive. He was a hard-working single father who had built his life around responsibility and love for his child. He worked at the company in a mid-level position, respected but never in the spotlight. Tonight, he was invited to the gala because of his dedication and years of service. For Daniel, it was less about luxury and more about showing his daughter a world she rarely got to see. Beside him stood his little girl, Lily, her tiny hand clutching his. Her eyes sparkled as she looked around at the grandeur of the room. She was curious about everything: the tall ceiling, the musicians playing violins, the people dressed in gowns that shimmered like fairy tale costumes. Lily asked question after question, and Daniel answered each one with patience. He didn't care if people looked at him as out of place, his only focus was making sure his daughter enjoyed the evening. As the night went on, Lily noticed something that others had ignored. She tugged on her father's sleeve and pointed toward the corner where Sophia sat. "Daddy," she whispered, "why is that lady sitting alone?" She looks so pretty, but nobody is talking to her. Daniel followed his daughter's gaze. For a moment, he just looked. He saw the young woman in the wheelchair, her eyes fixed on the dance floor, her smile faint but steady, as if she was trying not to let her sadness show. Something stirred in his chest. It was not pity, but recognition. He saw the loneliness in her eyes, and it reminded him of times when he himself had felt invisible, raising his child without a partner, struggling quietly while the world rushed past. He crouched down to his daughter's level and whispered, "Some people don't always notice the ones who deserve the most attention. That lady might be feeling left out." Lily's little face frowned with concern. "But why, Daddy? She looks nice. I want to say hi to her." Daniel paused. He looked around the room filled with important people, then back at his daughter. "If you want to, sweetheart, then let's go," he said softly. In that instant, a choice was made. While others remained caught up in their own pride and comfort, Daniel and his little girl decided to do what no one else had. With small but determined steps, Lily walked with her father toward Sophia's corner. Sophia noticed them coming and straightened slightly, surprised. Most people glanced at her quickly before moving away. But this man and his daughter were coming closer, and they didn't seem hesitant or uncomfortable. Lily was the first to speak. Her voice was gentle but full of cheer. "Hi," she said, smiling brightly. "I'm Lily. What's your name?" Sophia's heart softened instantly. She was used to polite greetings, but this was different. This was a child speaking with sincerity, with no hesitation, no judgment, no pity. Just kindness. "Hello," Sophia replied warmly. "My name is Sophia." "It's very nice to meet you, Lily." Daniel leaned forward, offering his hand. "I'm Daniel," he said. "I work at your father's company. I hope you don't mind us coming over." Sophia shook his hand gently and smiled. "Not at all. Thank you for saying hello. Most people are too busy tonight." Daniel's eyes held hers, and he answered honestly, "Well, they don't know what they're missing." For a moment, Sophia was caught off guard. She wasn't used to people speaking to her so directly, so naturally. His words felt genuine, not rehearsed, not forced. She felt seen in a way she hadn't for a very long time. Lily climbed onto a nearby chair, swinging her legs happily. "You look like a princess," she said suddenly, her eyes wide with admiration. "I think your dress is the prettiest here." Sophia laughed softly, her cheeks turning pink. "Thank you, Lily. That's very sweet of you." Daniel noticed the way his daughter had brought a spark of joy to Sophia's face. It touched him deeply. He realized how simple kindness could change someone's night. He began to ask Sophia questions not about her father, not about business, but about her. "So, Sophia," he asked, "do you enjoy coming to these events, or would you rather be somewhere else?" Sophia's eyes lit up with surprise. Hardly anyone ever asked her opinion about such things. She answered honestly, "Sometimes it feels like I don't belong here. I love spending time with my father, but I prefer quiet places, libraries, art galleries, even gardens. They feel more real to me than these parties." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. I'd pick a quiet park over a ballroom any day." Their conversation continued, and Sophia found herself laughing at his stories about raising Lily as a single dad. He spoke openly, without trying to impress her, and that authenticity made her feel comfortable. Lily, meanwhile, kept chatting about her favorite books and how she wanted to learn piano. Sophia listened with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing along. Then, as the music in the ballroom shifted to a slower tune, Daniel glanced at Sophia with a playful smile. "You know," he said, "I think everyone here has forgotten something important." Sophia tilted her head curiously. "What's that?" Daniel looked straight into her eyes and asked, "Would you like to be my date tonight?" For a moment, silence seemed to fall around them. Sophia blinked, certain she had misheard. She glanced at him, then at the ballroom full of people who had always looked past her. And then, slowly, a laugh bubbled out of her chest. Not a mocking laugh, but one of joy, disbelief, and sudden freedom. "Are you serious?" she asked, smiling wider than she had all evening. Daniel nodded without hesitation. "Completely serious. You're the most interesting person in this room, and I'd be honored if you'd let me be your date." Sophia's heart swelled. For years, she had been invisible, politely acknowledged but never truly included. And now, here was a man who saw her not the wheelchair, not her father's status, but her. Her laughter, her intelligence, her presence. She looked at Lily, who clapped her hands and said, "Yes. Be my daddy's date. Then we can all have fun together." In that instant, Sophia said the words she never thought she'd get to say at an event like this. "Yes, I would love that." Her voice was clear, confident, and filled with joy. The moment felt like magic. And though the night was far from over, something inside Sophia had already changed forever. The room was alive with chatter, clinking glasses, and soft music, yet something had shifted quietly in one corner of the grand ballroom. Sophia, who had been invisible for so long, suddenly found herself at the center of something she had never experienced before. Daniel's words still echoed in her ears, "Would you like to be my date tonight?" For a moment, it felt unreal, almost like a dream. She looked at him again, half expecting him to laugh or say it was just a joke, but he didn't. His eyes were steady, warm, and filled with sincerity. Sophia's cheeks glowed, her lips curled into a smile, and before she could even think twice, she said yes. It wasn't just a polite yes, it was the kind of yes that carried hope, excitement, and a little spark of wonder. Her laughter rang out, clear and genuine, drawing the attention of people nearby. Heads turned in her direction, surprised to see the CEO's daughter smiling so brightly. Daniel's little girl, Lily, clapped her small hands with joy. "Yay," she exclaimed. "Now you can be Daddy's date, and we can all have fun together." The innocence in her voice made Sophia's heart melt. Children had a way of speaking truth without hesitation, without fear of judgment. And in that moment, Sophia felt freer than she had in years. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat beside her, no longer treating her like someone separate from the event but as his chosen companion. He didn't lower his voice in pity, didn't use the tone people often used when speaking to her as if she were fragile. He simply spoke as if she were anyone else, a woman worth knowing, a person worth spending time with. "So, Sophia," he said with a playful grin, "as my date tonight, what's the first thing you'd like us to do? Should we enjoy the music, or maybe gossip about the guests?" Sophia laughed again, covering her mouth with her hand. "Oh, gossip sounds tempting," she replied. "But maybe we should start with the music." Daniel nodded, tapping his fingers on the table in rhythm with the orchestra. He looked at Lily, who was already swaying happily to the tune. "Looks like Lily agrees," he said, making them all laugh again. Across the ballroom, some guests were beginning to notice. Whispers floated through the air. People who had ignored Sophia all evening now glanced curiously at her corner. They saw the CEO's daughter talking, laughing, and shining with life. For the first time, she wasn't sitting silently, watching the world pass her by. She was part of it. One woman leaned toward her husband and asked softly, "Who is that man with her? I've never seen her laugh like that." The husband shrugged, unable to look away. "I don't know, but he seems to have done something none of us ever could." Even the CEO noticed. From across the hall, he paused mid-conversation, his eyes softening as he watched his daughter. He had never seen her smile so widely at one of these events. He didn't know what Daniel had said, but he could tell something important was happening. For the first time in years, he let himself relax, relief washing over him like a quiet wave. Back at the table, Daniel leaned closer and asked Sophia, "Do you like dancing?" Sophia looked at the dance floor where couples glided gracefully across the polished wood. She hesitated, her smile dimming slightly. "I love dancing," she admitted softly, "but it's been a long time since I've had the chance." Daniel thought for a moment. Then he extended his hand, his expression playful but sincere. "Well, then, let's dance. Who says you need to be on the dance floor to enjoy it?" Sophia blinked in surprise, her heart racing. "You mean here?" "Why not?" Daniel said with a shrug. "Music doesn't belong only to the people on their feet. It belongs to anyone who feels it." For a second, she froze, caught between embarrassment and excitement. But then, slowly, she placed her hand in his. The moment their hands touched, warmth spread through her. Daniel swayed gently, moving his shoulders and tapping his foot, and Sophia found herself laughing as she followed along from her chair. It wasn't the traditional dance people expected, but it was theirs. Lily joined in, spinning in small circles beside them, giggling as her dress twirled. The sight drew even more attention. People who had once walked past without a second glance now found themselves captivated. The CEO's daughter was dancing not with her feet, but with her spirit, with laughter, with joy that lit up the room. For once, the spotlight had shifted, and it wasn't because of wealth or power. It was because of a single dad and his little girl who had dared to include someone the world had left out. As the music ended, Sophia clapped along with Lily, her eyes shining. "Thank you," she said softly, looking at Daniel. "I haven't felt this alive in such a long time." Daniel smiled. "Thank you for saying yes. I think you just made this night unforgettable for both of us." Their conversation continued, flowing as naturally as a river. Daniel told stories about raising Lily, about the struggles and joys of single parenthood. Sophia listened with fascination, asking questions, laughing at his humor, and admiring the quiet strength behind his words. She, in turn, shared her love for painting, her favorite authors, and the way she found comfort in stargazing. Daniel listened closely, never once interrupting, never once looking away. For the first time, Sophia felt like someone truly saw her, not the chair, not the disability, not the title of CEO's daughter, but her. As time passed, more guests began to gather near their table, curious to hear Sophia's laughter and clever remarks. She told a story about an art exhibition she once visited, describing it with such passion that even strangers leaned in to listen. She had always been full of light, but tonight, that light finally had the space to shine. Daniel noticed the shift. He leaned closer and whispered, "See? They're finally noticing what I saw the moment we walked over." Sophia looked around and realized he was right. People weren't looking at her with pity anymore. They were drawn in, enchanted by her presence. For once, she was not invisible. Her father walked toward the table then, his expression filled with pride and gratitude. But he didn't interrupt. He simply stood at a distance for a moment, taking in the sight of his daughter laughing, surrounded by people who were finally treating her as she deserved. Inside, Sophia felt a quiet happiness settle over her. She knew the night wasn't about the whispers, the attention, or even the ballroom itself. It was about the courage of one man and the innocence of a little girl who had chosen to see her. That choice had changed everything. And though the night was far from over, Sophia already sensed that this moment the simple question, "Would you like to be my date?" would remain in her memory forever. It wasn't a grand gesture of wealth or power, but something far greater, genuine kindness. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't worry about that. Tonight, she was laughing, she was shining, and she was living the dream she had quietly carried in her heart for years. The music in the ballroom shifted again, filling the air with softer, richer tones. Guests swayed gracefully on the polished wooden floor, their movements elegant under the glow of crystal chandeliers. But the true brightness that evening wasn't the chandeliers or the glittering gowns, it was the light in Sophia's eyes. For years she had been quiet at such events, almost invisible, but tonight she laughed, joked, and shined in a way that surprised everyone. Daniel sat beside her, his daughter Lily dancing happily near the table, twirling and giggling in her small dress. To Sophia, it felt as if her world had suddenly changed. The loneliness that once weighed her down had lifted, replaced by a warmth she hadn't known in years. And all it took was one man who chose to look at her differently, and a little girl who treated her like a princess without hesitation. People began to notice. First, a few curious glances, then hushed whispers, and soon full attention turned toward her corner of the ballroom. The same guests who had walked past her earlier, offering polite smiles before hurrying away, were now watching her closely. They heard her laughter and were drawn in by her energy. It was as though the forgotten corner had suddenly become the heart of the room. Some people tried to act as if they weren't staring, but their eyes betrayed their fascination. One man whispered to his wife, "I've never seen her like this before. She's glowing." The wife nodded, her expression softening. "Perhaps we've all been blind," she replied. The CEO, standing across the room, watched quietly. For years he had carried the silent pain of seeing his daughter ignored by the very people who praised him. He often felt helpless, unable to give her the simple gift of inclusion. But now, as he looked at her laughing beside Daniel and Lily, his chest filled with a mixture of relief and gratitude. It was as if a weight had been lifted. He didn't know Daniel well, but in that moment, he silently thanked him for doing what wealth and power could never achieve, making his daughter feel alive. Sophia leaned closer to Daniel, her voice filled with amusement. "Do you realize people are staring at us?" Daniel chuckled. "Of course they are. They're confused. They've probably never seen you having this much fun." Sophia shook her head, her smile playful. "Or they're shocked that someone would actually sit with me and treat me like this." Daniel's expression grew serious. He looked into her eyes and said, "Well, that just shows how wrong they've been all along. You're more captivating than anyone else in this room." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't used to such words, spoken so honestly. Her cheeks warmed, and for a moment she felt a wave of emotions she couldn't describe. Gratitude, joy, and a sense of being valued all mixed together. Meanwhile, Lily returned to the table, out of breath from spinning around. She plopped into her chair and grinned at Sophia. "You're the best date ever," she declared, making Daniel laugh. Sophia laughed too, her heart melting at the child's innocent words. As their laughter filled the air, something remarkable happened. A group of guests, curious and drawn by the energy at the table, slowly approached. One woman asked Sophia about her gown, admiring the way it shimmered. Another man asked if she had read the latest best-selling novel, surprised when Sophia not only had but gave an insightful opinion about it. Soon, more people joined in, realizing she was more than just the CEO's daughter in a wheelchair. She was intelligent, witty, and engaging. Sophia answered their questions with charm, sharing stories, making gentle jokes, and even teasing Daniel in a light-hearted way that made the whole group laugh. For the first time in her life at such an event, she wasn't on the outside looking in. She was in the middle of it, surrounded by people who were finally seeing her. Daniel leaned back slightly, watching her with admiration. He had only wanted to make her feel included, but now he saw her true strength. She didn't need pity or special treatment. She only needed the chance to show the world who she was. And once given that chance, she captivated everyone. The CEO slowly made his way across the ballroom, his steps measured but his eyes warm. As he approached the group, The guest stepped aside respectfully, letting him through. He placed a gentle hand on Sophia's shoulder, his pride clear in his expression. "I see you've made some new friends tonight," he said softly. Sophia looked up at him, her smile wide. "Yes, Dad. I think I finally did." The CEO glanced at Daniel, and their eyes met. For a brief moment, no words were exchanged, but an understanding passed between them. Daniel gave a small nod, as if to say, "She deserves this, and I will always see her." The CEO's heart swelled with gratitude. As the evening continued, Sophia's corner became the liveliest part of the gala. People who had once ignored her now found themselves drawn to her laughter, her charm, and her stories. It wasn't just her beauty that captured them, it was her spirit, her intelligence, and the joy she radiated when finally treated as an equal. Daniel remained by her side, steady and supportive, never once trying to take the spotlight. He let Sophia shine, encouraging her with every word and smile. Lily, full of innocence and energy, continued to call Sophia the princess of the night, which made everyone around them chuckle with affection. As the clock ticked later, Sophia realized she hadn't once felt the weight of loneliness that usually followed her at these events. Instead, she felt lighter, freer, and full of hope. For years, she had accepted being unseen, but tonight proved that one act of kindness could shift everything. When the orchestra began its final song of the night, Daniel leaned closer and whispered, "Thank you for letting me be your date. I think I was the lucky one tonight." Sophia's eyes softened. "No," she replied, her voice gentle but firm. "I think I was." The guests clapped as the music ended, but for Sophia, the true applause came from within. She had stepped into the night expecting nothing, but she was leaving with something she had always longed for, a feeling of being valued, not because of her father, not because of pity, but simply because of who she was. The CEO escorted Sophia to the car when the gala ended, Daniel and Lily walking beside them. As the night air wrapped around them, the CEO turned to Daniel and said quietly, "You gave my daughter something I never could. You made her feel alive again. For that, I owe you more than words can ever express." Daniel shook his head humbly. "You don't owe me anything. All I did was ask her to be my date. The rest was all her." The CEO smiled faintly, looking at his daughter's glowing face. "Perhaps. But sometimes it takes one person to remind the world of what was always there." Sophia listened quietly, her heart swelling with emotions she couldn't fully express. She looked at Daniel and Lily, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged. The night of the gala came to an end, but its memory lingered far longer than the music or the lights. For Sophia, something inside her had changed. She had come expecting another evening of quiet smiles, polite nods, and silent loneliness. Instead, she left with laughter echoing in her heart and a warmth she hadn't felt in years. The words still rang in her mind, "Can I be your date?" Such a simple question, but it carried the power to shift her entire world. The days that followed were different. People at her father's company began speaking about the gala, not just about the business deal, but about the CEO's daughter. Stories spread quickly how she had laughed, how she had joked, how her corner became the liveliest part of the room. Some even admitted quietly that they had misjudged her all these years. For once, she wasn't described as the girl in the wheelchair. She was remembered for her smile, her wit, and her presence. Her father noticed the difference too. At breakfast one morning, he looked across the table at Sophia, who was humming softly to herself as she sipped tea. "You seem lighter these days," he said gently. Sophia smiled knowingly. "Maybe I am, Dad. Maybe it just took someone reminding me that I'm not invisible." The CEO nodded, his heart swelling with pride and relief. "Daniel reminded all of us," he said. "And for that, I'll always be grateful." Meanwhile, Daniel went back to his regular life as a single father. He worked hard at the company, dropped Lily off at school, cooked dinners, and folded laundry late at night. But he too carried something new inside him, a memory of Sophia's smile and the joy he had seen when she felt truly included. Lily, of course, wouldn't stop talking about her. "Daddy," she said one evening as she colored at the kitchen table, "when can we see the princess again?" Daniel chuckled softly, ruffling her hair. "She's not really a princess, you know." "Yes, she is," Lily said firmly. "She's the princess of the night. And she's your date." Daniel shook his head with a smile, but deep down, his daughter's words stayed with him. A few days later, Sophia sent a message to Daniel, thanking him once more for the unforgettable evening. She wrote that his kindness had meant more than he could imagine, and that Lily's cheerful spirit had touched her heart. Daniel replied modestly, saying it was Sophia who had made the evening shine. From then on, they began to exchange messages more often. It started with small notes, simple good mornings, or funny little stories from their daily lives. Daniel told her about the challenges of raising Lily alone, and Sophia shared the joy she found in her painting. They discovered they had more in common than they thought. Both valued honesty, both appreciated the little things in life, and both carried invisible burdens that had shaped them into who they were. Soon, their conversations moved from messages to visits. Daniel and Lily were invited to the CEO's home one weekend. Lily ran through the large halls with curiosity, while Sophia showed her around with laughter. Daniel and the CEO sat together for a while, and though they came from different worlds, they found respect in each other. The CEO could see clearly that Daniel was no ordinary man. He didn't see status or wealth, he simply saw people. Sophia and Daniel spent more time together, not in ballrooms or under chandeliers, but in places where life felt real. They visited art galleries, where Sophia explained her favorite paintings with passion while Daniel listened with admiration. They went to quiet parks, where Lily chased butterflies and Sophia laughed at her excitement. They even spent evenings on Sophia's balcony, gazing at the stars she loved so much, sharing dreams and fears they rarely voiced to anyone else. Through it all, Sophia's life transformed. She was no longer defined by silence or pity. She was part of something genuine, a friendship, a bond, a connection that didn't care about appearances or circumstances. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel different. She felt whole. The CEO watched these changes with quiet joy. One evening, as he stood by the window of his study, he saw Sophia outside in the garden, laughing with Lily while Daniel told a story that made them both giggle. He felt his throat tighten with emotion. For years he had worried about his daughter's future, fearing she would always be lonely. But now, he realized she had found something priceless: people who truly saw her. Sophia, too, felt the difference. One night, as she looked at her reflection in the mirror, she whispered to herself, "I am enough. I am more than what people see." And for the first time, she truly believed it. The story of that gala night spread beyond the company. People spoke about how one man and his little girl had made the CEO's daughter shine. Some called it touching, others called it inspiring, but for Sophia, it wasn't about the story people told. It was about the feeling she carried in her heart, the knowledge that she was seen, valued, and loved for who she was. Daniel never tried to be a hero. He never acted as though he had done something extraordinary. To him, it was simple. He saw a woman sitting alone and chose to ask her a question that no one else had dared to ask. But in that simplicity lay the power of kindness, the power to change a life. As weeks turned into months, Sophia and Daniel's bond grew deeper. Lily became like family to Sophia, often calling her "my princess friend." And while Sophia's story had once been one of silence, it now became one of laughter, connection, and hope. The CEO, seeing the happiness in his daughter's eyes, finally felt peace in his heart. One evening, he sat beside Sophia and said softly, "All my life, I've tried to give you everything: comfort, care, and love. But what Daniel gave you that night was something I never could. He gave you the gift of being seen. Never forget, my dear, that you are worthy of love, just as you are." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as she hugged her father. She knew he was right. That night at the gala wasn't just about being asked to be someone's date. It was about being given the chance to live freely, to shine, to be included. In the end, the memory of that evening wasn't about the chandeliers, the music, or even the expensive celebration. It was about a single moment, a man bending down, looking into her eyes, and asking with sincerity, "Can I be your date?" A moment that seemed so small to others but meant the world to her. For Sophia, life would never be the same again. She had been ignored for so long, but now she carried proof that kindness could rewrite a story, that courage could break down walls, and that love could appear in the most unexpected ways. And as she drifted to sleep that night, she whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, not for wealth, not for status, but for the gift of being seen. Because sometimes, all it takes is one question to change everything.